Dead Space. This is the remake of the original 2008 video game Dead Space from EA and the now defunct Visceral Games. I know I'm a little late to the party, but I just finished it last night and I'm incredibly excited to talk to you guys about it. So without further ado, let's jump into my time with Dead Space. Before we get started today, go ahead down below and let me know what you thought about Dead Space. Did you play the original game? Did you play the Callisto Protocol? How did you like this remake compared to the original game? Was this your very first time experiencing a game like Dead Space? Let me know down below, and while you're down there, go ahead and hit the like button as well, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so that you're notified whenever I upload new videos like this. I also just want to talk a little bit about my personal experience with Dead Space. Like I said, the original game came out in 2008, and at the time that it was released, I was actually only 9 years old. This was not a game that I regularly played. One, I was way too scared to play a game like this. Two, even if I wanted to play the game, there was no way that my mom would let me have a game like Dead Space with all of the horror and the gore, all of that rated M goodness. Like, there was no way that I was going to be playing this game at my house. So the only times that I was able to actually play the game was either in secret on my computer whenever no one was looking, and I would have to uninstall the game, like if my parents were getting suspicious, or this was the primary one. I would go to my friend's house who had the game, and I would just watch him play it. That's really my whole experience with Dead Space. I have memories of what it was like playing the game back whenever it was still kind of a new game back in the late 2000s, but overall, this remake, this was my first real experience jumping into Dead Space proper. So the original 2008 Dead Space was directed by Michael Condrey and Brett Robbins, and the executive producer was Glenn Schofield. This 2023 remake of Dead Space is basically an entirely new team. They're called Motive Studio, and they're the ones who are responsible for the new Star Wars Battlefront 2, as well as Star Wars Squadrons, and they even have an upcoming Iron Man video game in the works. So if you like this game and you like what they've previously worked on, I think it's safe to say that you can pretty much expect a really cool Iron Man game coming out fairly soon. Also, this remake is essentially fully built from the ground up using an entirely new engine that's different from the original one. It's jumped over to Frostbite, so if you've played the Battlefield games, or basically any new shooter that EA is putting out right now, everything is running on the Frostbite engine. It's a solid engine, it works well, it looks nice. This game looks really good running on the Frostbite engine. And also, like I mentioned with the producer of the original game, Glenn Schofield, he, since making Dead Space, has gone on to work on many other projects, one of them being the director of the Callisto Protocol. I'll go ahead and leave a link right up here for my personal review of the Callisto Protocol, but if you've stuck around already, or slight spoiler for my thought on that game, I was not a fan of that game at all. That game was very poor. As someone who loves horror video games and likes third-person action exploration puzzle games, the game let me down quite a bit, and I'm just first and foremost going to put this out there right now. This game revitalized my love for the genre, for sci-fi horror, for third-person puzzle shooters. This was such a fantastic experience, and I'm so excited to just jump in and talk to you guys about it. With that said, let's go ahead and just talk about the good. And overall, this game was such a positive experience for me. As someone who loves the Resident Evil franchise, it was so very clear to me that this game took so much inspiration, not just the remake, but the original game as well. There was very clear inspiration from the Resident Evil series, particularly that of something like Resident Evil 4 as well. And now that we've got games like Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 being remade, this game feels like it absolutely fits this current mold of horror shooters that we have nowadays. And it feels so good. I mean, even if you were to go back and play the original game, I think you can safely say that the game doesn't feel necessarily outdated, maybe a little bit visually. But now that we have this remake with all of the visual stuff that's been updated, this game feels like a brand new video game. Like I said, built from the ground up, this game looks phenomenal. It looks so good. The attention to detail here is psychotic. It's awesome. It's so good. All of the animations from your main playable character, Isaac Clarke, as well as just all the aliens and all of the supporting cast, everything looks and flows really, really well. Outside of just the very clear Resident Evil gameplay inspiration, there's also so much inspiration from stuff like Ridley Scott's Alien franchise. So if that's up your alley, I mean, atmospherically, graphically, this game is such a sight to behold for horror fans, for sci-fi fans, for video game fans. I mean, the game looks awesome. Another thing that I just love to death about this game is the sound design. You can tell that the development team probably put, outside of, just remaking the original game, one of the newer attentions to detail that they put into this game is the sound design. I remember before the game was released, I think EA or Motive Studios, one of the two, they were putting out videos that was going through the sound design process, and they were giving us updates on how the sound has evolved over time, how it works with 3D audio now. And so if you're playing on a system like PlayStation 5, the game sounds amazing with headphones on, and you put yourself in a dark room and you just have your headphones on and you're playing this game, and it really feels like you are on the Ishimura. Like, it feels like you are on this space shuttle and you're fighting for your life to survive from all these aliens. It's unreal. The sound design, the guns walking around, all of just the sounds of gas coming from pipes and just asteroids hitting the ship, like everything. It all just sounds, I mean, I guess I don't really know because I've never been in a spaceship, but as far as I can tell, this sounds like you're in space. This sounds like you are genuinely here in this situation. The sound design is unreal. I have nothing but just 11 out of 10 props for sound design alone. That, like, if this game should win Game of the Year for anything, it should be for sound design. The sound design in this game is bonkers. And as it was built from the ground up as well, I mean, there's a lot of differences here that we can see from the story alone. I think the way that just the cinematography works in this game is incredible, and it's definitely a departure from the original game. The original didn't have as much of a cinematic feel as this game does, but what Dead Space Remake includes, as far as just all of the additional voice acting, all of the additional camera scenes, and just the difference of layout and everything, it all feels like a brand new experience, and it feels like a story, and it feels like an experience that you actually feel like you want to get invested into. It all seems really intentional and really focused on, and I just love the cinematic feel that this game has. Another great thing about this game is the gameplay. It's very simple, and it's really addictive. I remember kind of feeling like it was a bit of a slog in the beginning of the game just because of some pacing issues that I'll talk about here in just a little bit. But once I started just obtaining weapons and I started just finding my way through the Ishimura and just got really used to cutting off enemy limbs and stuff like that, I started getting really addicted to just playing through the game. I want to say this review kind of took a while for it to come out, because when I started playing the game, I got this game like right when it came out. So it's taken a little bit for this review to come, but as I just kind of continued to trudge my way through the game, I want to say about a third into the game was really whenever I started being consistent picking up the game, because like I said, I just felt the gameplay loop was pretty addictive for me, and I really just enjoyed making my way through, the maps and unlocking new key cards and going into areas that I wasn't able to go into before, and just progressing through the story and just things starting to click in place for me. As I was going through the game, it just continued to get better and better and better. Another thing that's really good about the game, which should be good for a shooter, is the guns, the weapons. As you continue to go through the game and you pick up new weapons, it becomes very clear that the developers of not only the original but also the remake wanted to make it feel like every gun is wholly unique from one another. You have some of the stuff that you expect from a game like this. You have the flamethrower, you've got the machine gun, you've got the pistol, but then you've got other very intriguing weapons as well, like the gun that allows you to shoot saw blades out of it, and it suspends those saws in midair as they just continually spin, so you can just hold them in front of enemy limbs and it just saws off arms and legs and heads and stuff like that. It's stuff like that that makes a sci-fi horror game like this so fun. And outside of the guns and just using weapons like that, you have this sort of kinetic stasis ability where you press a button and you're able to pick things up with your kinetic stasis ability, and you can throw them, or you can suspend time for certain objects or enemies, and you can hold them in place or make them just move a lot slower so that you can, you know, time up your aim just right and stuff like that. All of that makes this a very, very unique, very interesting gameplay loop. And like I said, just as I continue to go through it and just continue to get familiar with using stuff like stasis and using stuff, just all of the different types of weapons that you have, it just continued to get better and better and better as I played through the game. There's a ton of other just general stuff from the game that I think is overall a really positive experience, especially if you compare this to my Callisto Protocol review. That game was an hour long of me basically just ranting about all of the stuff that I didn't like. This is not going to be as long of a review. I also just want to let you know that there are more things that I like about this game than I liked about the Callisto Protocol. And a lot of it comes down to just little things like just atmosphere, like I said, with sound design, the gameplay, even just the story. For as much as the story, even in this game, it's not something that I would say goes down in history as one of the greatest stories of all time. But even still, like I said, I just continue to go through the game. The more invested I got with these characters, with the lore and the more complex storytelling that it does, this game does so much great. And I'm just so thankful, and it's just like such a breath of fresh air to play a horror game like this that's not Resident Evil, that feels so fun to play, that I can genuinely recommend to someone, say, please get this game. This is a must-play experience. But like with all things, nothing here is perfect, so there are some mixed feelings that I have about the game. So let's talk about the things that I thought were just kind of okay, I could have gone with or without, you know, that stuff. Really, the main thing with this game, what kind of came down to the technical side of stuff. There were just some moments where I had some bugs. Nothing ever was really game-breaking, but I had a few bugs here and there. I wish I could capture some footage of it, but it would just be some stuff that would take me out of the experience. This is a physics-based engine, a physics-based video game. Like I said, you can pick things up, throw things around. You got ragdoll physics and stuff like that, but there would just be some stuff that kind of would take me out of the realism. Of course, this is a sci-fi thing. It's not supposed to be totally realistic of what would actually happen or anything like that, but just stuff like you stomp down on a corpse that was already laying there of a human, not an alien. You stomp down on their leg and like all of their limbs just fully fly off their body and just blood is just everywhere, just from one little stomp to the foot or something like that. Just little things like that where I'm like, this is silly, you know, like, okay, it's kind of fun to look at, but whatever. I think a handful of times I would stomp down on an enemy's corpse, and whenever you do that in the game, they drop an item for you to pick up, and it's always randomized whenever you do that. But there have definitely been some times where I would do that and they wouldn't drop anything, or it would be a situation where you'd be floating through space and you would try to grab an item and then you accidentally touch something that just shoots that item way far away and it goes out of bounds and you can't get it, or it clips through the wall and you're just unable to retrieve that item. Stuff like that. Nothing, like I said, game breaking in any way, just little minor inconveniences like that kind of ticked me off. But that's really about it. And lastly, let's just talk about the bad, and I kind of alluded to it sort of at the beginning of the review when talking about my experience with the beginning of the game and kind of taking it a while for me to get to a point where I was really enjoying myself playing the game, and that is the pacing. I think the pacing of the game is really, really poor in the very beginning of the game, especially whenever you have stuff like all of the text logs and audio logs. This is something that I personally really dislike in a narrative, story-driven video game. Games like Dark Souls, the Bloodborne series, you know, games like that where you have items that have descriptions, and through those descriptions, as you're exploring the world, you can find pieces of text hidden here and there. I think that works really well for, you know, fantasy settings in particular. I don't necessarily have an issue with that in particular, but whenever you have a sci-fi game like this is a horror game. You know, you're on a spaceship, you're fighting aliens, you're shooting all these different crazy fictional weapons and all this stuff. I think whenever you're trying to tell the story through stuff like text logs and audio logs, I think that, personally, that slightly damages the argument to be had whenever trying to say that video games are a worthwhile and worthy storytelling medium. If you wanted the player to obtain the information by reading, write a book, make a comic book. And I know the Dead Space series does have literary stuff like comic books and things like that to kind of help build some of the world that they've made here. But in a game like this, I don't necessarily want to have to sit down and pay attention to just listening to an audio log, or sit there and break up the pace to read a whole thing of text talking about some cult, or just reading about some crew members, you know, talking crap. Just like, it's not something that I really want to do in a video game like this. If you want to tell that story, if you think that information is important in a game like this, please, developers, find some other way that's not just through finding text logs or audio files and things like that here and there. It feels pretty lazy to me. I'm not a fan of it. That wasn't great for me. And personally, after feeling like I'm getting tired of reading all these text logs and listening to all these audio files, and I just decided, you know, I'm just gonna grab them and just move on. I'm not gonna read these. I'm not really interested in what's going on. I felt like I had a much better time. I like just playing through the game. Some of the story that was told through the characters and things like that. Sure, I'm glad that there is some supplemental material that you can read outside of the gameplay and the cutscenes and things like that. But at the same time, it was frustrating to me. So I just decided, you know, I'm not gonna waste my time with that stuff right now. I'm just gonna play through the game. And that is what really brought me back in. It's just playing the game. The game itself is just so good. I loved playing it. Once I got out of that issue that I had with the pacing in the beginning of the game became a lot more enjoyable for me. But guys, that's it. That's my review for Dead Space. Huge shout out as well to my buddy Colin. As a gift, Colin bought me both the Callisto Protocol and Dead Space. I'm very grateful for you, buddy. Thank you for this game. If you all want me to play a game and definitely review it on the channel, just give it to me and I'll definitely review it on the channel. But guys, let me know, how did you like Dead Space? Did you play the original game? Did you just play the 2023 remake? Let me know down below in the comments. And while you're down there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well. Also, while you're down there, in the description box, there's a link to join my Discord. If you are a fan of RPGs, JRPGs, really just story-driven games, even games like Dead Space and Resident Evil, I love that sort of stuff. The community is full of other people who love that sort of stuff as well. Go down there, join the Discord. I would love to have one-on-one conversation with you. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.